Hi, it is nice to see you all. So this is a sophisticated tool for innovation in urban planning and design. So's that. So's that. This is some of the most exciting theater you're going to see, and it's happening for free all across the country almost every day of the week. So's this. So welcome to Perfect City. It's a toolkit that started as an experimental art project and a working group that uplifts the lived experiences of people in cities to make democracy work better at the level of the street, the neighborhood, the city, and eventually the network. Perfect City started with a bunch of questions and possibilities. I'm going to tell you a couple of origin stories. They loop and weave and double back on themselves. They turn into new pathways of desire, which is a term we'll get to in a minute. But what it really boils down to is, do you want to learn about how to innovate policy and design? Ask a sixth grader to draw a map of their day. Do you want to make local government meetings more effective and more joyous and more inviting? Then you can frame them as theater. So, Perfect City's first story, flash backward, it's 2009. I'm living my best bohemian life as an actor and playwright in Brooklyn, New York. That picture, the black and white picture, although I look miserable, I'm happy because I'm touring the world with an experimental theater company called Elevator Repair Service. That picture on the right is a play that I wrote called Open House. Open House was performed in New York in 24 apartments, from a Bushwick squat to a developer's loft. It was about how gentrification is affecting the city and how quickly it was moving. What we learned from Open House was that where you place a theater experience, the context is as important as what you say and how you say it. So after Open House was presented, I got invited to Portland, Oregon to possibly do a local remount there. And while I was in Portland, an outreach director from the theater said, hey, there's a city council member who wants to meet and talk about your show because they may want to support it. We should go down to City Hall and have a meeting. So we went to City Hall, we met with this amazing council member. His name was Nick Fish, and we talked about the project. It seemed to go well. He was going to make up his mind. And then as we were leaving, he said, you should stick around for the council meeting that's about to happen. It's going to be a hot one. And I was like, bro, city council meetings are not hot. And he saw the look in my eye, and he said, no, this one's about zoning. And I was like, case in point. But I felt a little crassly like I better stick around because this guy was going to maybe support what I was doing. So I went up to the council chambers and sat. And right away, I noticed something kind of interesting. This city council chambers looked a little like an experimental theater setup. There was a stage with people facing us, and then another place where people would have their backs to us while they testified, and then everyone's face was projected really big on a giant screen above everybody else, alongside this kind of abstracted map of Portland. So I was like, huh. And then I noticed that people were getting very serious about what they were going to say at this council meeting. They were writing furiously. They were rehearsing themselves. I asked the guy next to me what was up, and he said, well, I only have 2 minutes. I've never spoken in public before, and what I say is important to me and my community. So I was like, wow, dramatic stakes. So then the meeting started, and as promised, it was about zoning, and as expected, it was super boring for a while. I was starting to wonder when it might be okay to leave and still be polite, and then the day was saved by a guy named Pete Colt. Pete Colt gets up to testify. He's like 6'3", gray-haired, avuncular, older, very polite white guy in an entirely beige suit, like kind of like your favorite uncle and kind of like the strange guy down the block, but who's not dangerous. And so Pete Colt gets up and he's really nice and he says, I'm so glad, council members, that you care so much about the city. What are you going to do about this? And he dumps a bag of trash in front of the council. It's crack vials and heroin works, used condoms, dirty diapers, all kinds of other stuff I don't even want to know about. And he says, I pick these up every day in the kids zone, so what are you all going to do? The kids zone is like schools and churches and playgrounds. The council member I had just met with stood up and said, Mr. Colt, there are other people that have to come testify. You just created a public health hazard. We're going to have to clear the room. And Pete Colt turns around without missing a beat and says, you just made my point better than I ever could have. I realized I was seeing some of the best theater I had seen all year. So I started visiting local government meetings wherever I was traveling to teach or perform or to make a show. That one is from Bismarck, North Dakota. I started working with an incredible director, Mallory Catlett, and we started assembling some of these transcripts from meetings we had seen into a script that we called The City We Make Together by Performing It. We were thinking we'd hire actors and we'd make a sweet show about everybody doing their best. And then we came up with the impossible challenge. Now, I don't know if any of you are experimental artists, but one thing we do as artists who experiment is to say, what's something we probably can't get away with in our work? And then can we try to make that happen? And that pursuit keeps us honest, to sort of dream the impossible dream. And we thought, well, what if the audience performs this piece? Because it's about democracy and participation. That probably won't work because audience participation in theater usually kind of sucks. And what if we try to make these local government transcripts really theatrically interesting? Well, that probably won't work because the local government meetings are pretty boring. We worked on it, we did it in 5 different cities in the US. We got some funding for it. So in each city, we had a local cohort that we called staffers, usher an audience through performing these transcripts. And then in each city, we created a local ending. And in that local ending, political adversaries from that community around a particular issue gathered with us in the safe space of art to make something in response to what was vexing them. Didn't have to solve the problem. We just wanted to know what could art do that local politics wasn't doing on its own. We made the show, we finished with our grant funding, we moved on to new projects, and we thought we were done. And then we got a couple of emails. One was from Asada Richards. She said, the project inspired me to run for office for city council in Houston. One was from Marcelino Quinones, and he ran for and won 2 terms in the state legislature of Arizona. And we were like, wow. These were 2 people who were already kind of organizing and active politically, but the project pushed them over the edge to actually take more action and run for office. What was even more interesting to me was that Asada didn't win a city council seat, but the visibility of the excellent campaign she ran allowed her to form a business incubator for small business owners who were Black women in 3rd Ward Houston, which was her neighborhood. And that was a way to stave off predatory developers, which was the issue she was running on in the first place. So even though Asada didn't win the race, democracy won on behalf of her neighborhood in Houston. Mallory and I started writing the book, The City We Make Together, with the University of Iowa Press, to kind of chronicle what went well and what could have gone better, so that if other people wanted to follow our pathway, they could. I started teaching a first-year seminar here called Is Politics a Performance? Students from Princeton visit council meetings in Trenton and Princeton, and then they assemble those transcripts, and their final project is to bring an audience through some of these transcripts in a theater piece just like ours. They also read some of the things we read. They also talk to people who are organizers and elected officials. And then at the end, they make their own local ending. What's something that's challenging them on campus right now, and they make an artistic response to that. So that's the end of story 1. Story 2 brings us back to 2016. I told you they were going to loop and weave. It's 2016, and I'm living on the Lower East Side of New York, and I meet an urban planner who grew up in my neighborhood. Her name is Deland Chan, and she said something that blew me away, which is that city kids are born urban planners, but they don't usually go into the field. They ride public transit before they're born. They understand the visible and invisible boundaries of where they belong and are accepted or don't belong. But the field of urban planning and design is mostly white, cisgender, able-bodied men from the suburbs. And their priorities, spoken or unspoken, have particular consequences for the lived experiences of people in neighborhoods. So I thought that was really interesting. I gathered a little bit of money from a foundation and paid a working group of 17 to 24-year-old born New Yorkers to meet and think about what we could make in response to this thing that I had just learned. I just started by thinking of them as experts, and I said, what are you all experts at in the city? A man named Jamel Ayala got up and said, I'm an expert at not running into people I don't want to. We all laughed. And someone else said, can you draw a map? Can you draw a map of that? And he drew a hilarious map of walking from his house across Tompkins Square Park in our neighborhood to his friend's house. And on the way, he avoided the dog run because there was an ex who had a dog there. He avoided the handball courts because there were a couple people he used to associate with that he didn't want to associate with. And he avoided the playground because he was alone and he didn't want to seem like a creep since he didn't have a kid with him. And it was a great story, and we all started drawing maps. And we all started realizing that all of us avoid something, and all of us are expert cartographers. We are actually born understanding places and connecting to places before we connect to written and spoken language. We read the work of Mindy Fullilove, who's in Orange, New Jersey, who's a generations-long organizer and map thinker and maker. We read Rebecca Solnit. We read The Power of Place by Dolores Hayden. And we started doing mapping workshops all over, wherever we could. So that meant with architects and urban planners. We did them at the Venice Architecture Biennale. We did them in cities whenever we were invited. And the conversations that emerged started challenging our ideas, again, of expertise. So if our idea of who an expert is or what expertise is leaves out the lived experience of people and places, what opportunities are we missing out on for better policy design and planning in our cities? One of the other things that happened in these first meetings, we realized, okay, we're onto something, right? And at the same time, we could run into the same problem that urban planning as a field was running into, in that the project was populated by global majority young people and run by this guy. So how could we address the implicit power imbalance of an older white guy running a group with people from diverse backgrounds? And instead of, one of the things I'm proud of, instead of saying we have to adhere to one aesthetic or we have to have a very specific mission that might foreclose on other people's ideas, we came up with a set of principles together that guide us in everything we do. Emotional amnesty just means no one holds what you say against you. Aesthetic amnesty means that no one's ideas about art are better or worse than others. Compensation for labor, pretty self-explanatory, but I don't know if you know this, in the arts, a lot of people do work for free, and often it's the people who are asking them to work that benefit. Logistical flexibility means you come and go as you need to, so that means some people dip in and dip out for years at a time. And then art grows from necessity. We don't really know what that means either, but we think it sounds cool. So from there, Perfect City has evolved a whole set of tools. I thought we were making a performance, but together we made zines, neighborhood tours, audio walks, and then we developed something called the Catcalling Project that was led by the women and femmes in the group. The Catcalling Project looked at the relationships between street harassment and gentrification. It's not exactly what you think. The rhetoric around gentrification is it makes a neighborhood safer. The question the Catcalling Project asked was, for whom? And often it turned out that young women of color were more vulnerable in gentrified neighborhoods than they were in the neighborhoods as they were before. From there, the Catcalling Project led avoidance mapping workshops for shelter residents from a domestic violence shelter for families on the Lower East Side. And they came back to the group and they were like, this is who should be urban planners. The people who are the most vulnerable in society are the people who should be telling us how protection should work. They spent 2 years working on a project called Invisible Guides. It involved public art, giant roundtable conversations with social workers and policymakers and artists. It involved street tours and a new issue of our zine. And what it really revealed was that our systems of protection, because we don't ask the people we're protecting, are actually systems of isolation. So what if we made systems of protection that kept people where they felt they belonged, where their networks of care was? And that was Invisible Guides. That's a very recent project of ours. From there, in 2024, I started working with Ebony Noel Golden, who's a cultural strategist funded by the Keller Center, and we tried to codify with the group all the things we were doing into a set of tools that other people could use. The value of that toolkit started to become apparent when we were asked to do a few sessions of the curriculum we were developing for a summer program in public housing on the Lower East Side. So this was for middle school students. If you can imagine, it is a very echoey room with 30 kids who wish they were outside playing, a few teaching assistants who were doing their best, and 4 of us who had not facilitated this size group before. It was a little bit, okay, very much a rowdy experience. But it was awesome because it allowed us to walk a new pathway with these kids and help them help us figure out how to make this work make sense to people. So we started by saying, show us your route, draw a map of your route from home to school, and talk about what you like and don't like on that route. And then we pointed out how policy intersects with their daily travels through the city, right? Your grandmother's elevator doesn't work, that's public housing policy. You like the fact that they turn that vacant lot into a park, that's Parks Department, land use, and zoning policy. You notice that the bus runs faster now that they painted the lanes a different color, that's transit policy. You already understand policy, now go tell the people in power how to do it better. So Perfect City has become about helping the next generation work with the existing generations to collaborate on cities that work better for the people who live there. Right now, we're traveling all over. We are going to Philadelphia. This is from the People's Budget Office, which is another initiative run by artists that is in the service of fiscal transparency. We've been to the Anchorage Public Library to talk to community councils there. And here at home, amazing Princeton athletes are working through the PACE Center for Civic Engagement to teach 6th through 8th graders at Christina Sykes Academy in Trenton how to make things better in their own city. So the last thing I want to mention is back to this slide. You remember this? This is a pathway of desire, and I mentioned that term. A pathway of desire is when someone paves a route, like through a park, like here, and the people who use that park understand how to do it better, and they tread a new pathway that becomes visible. What I learned recently is that a pathway of desire, which is basically our embodied knowledge of place, if we use a place, becomes visible after as few as 11 crossings. So all it takes is 11 of us to chart a new course, and we can start making places that work better for all of us. So what if our official maps actually contain not just the routes that we're told we should take, but the routes that we take because we live the experience of cities? And what happens if we decide that the best and most innovative urban planning and design comes from us? That's Perfect City, and I thank you so much.